Welcome to a Business Growth Mindset podcast. I'm Kristian Livolsi, and I'm incredibly grateful to be here today and share this episode with you. My purpose is to change the world one person at a time so that I can help them become the very best version of themselves. In today's episode, I share how great companies think and behave differently. Jim Collins said in his book, Good to Great, good is the enemy of great. Instead of being mere money-generating machines, good companies combine financial and social logic to build enduring success. To all the business owners and entrepreneurs, the crazy ones, the believers, the doers, the clever makers, the action takers, and everybody else in between, this podcast is designed for you. If this is your very first time visiting my channel or listening to my content, make sure you subscribe by clicking the subscribe button now and change the notifications alert so that you don't miss future episodes. Stick around and listen up, because what I'm going to share with you has the power to change your mindset and those around you. I want to start by saying thank you for the amazing support and feedback. Last week, I had the pleasure of onboarding a new coaching client that has been following my podcast for only 4 weeks, and I was moved by their excitement, and I can't wait to transform both them and their business into the very best version of themselves. I've always been fascinated with business. From an early age, growing up in a family business, watching my grandmother do the grind and later my parents, I was always interested in understanding, or was always interested to understand the difference between a bad and a good company. The difference presented itself to me over time, and I quickly came to the realization that there are 3 areas that differentiate a good and a bad company. Number 1 is stakeholder management, 2 is strategy, and the 3rd is action. I know it sounds pretty simple, but it's much more complicated. And from my experience, many business owners get these basic areas wrong. Now, this results in some of the most spectacular failures in business, and surprisingly, it's often another area that is blamed for the failure. To be fair, all three must work in unison to truly work, and this is where it can often become unstuck. You see, many businesses are dysfunctional because of a lack of systems, a lack of process, and a lack of leadership. So let's examine these 3 areas at a deeper level so that we can understand the difference between a good and a bad company. Stakeholder management, by definition, is the systematic identification, analysis, planning, and implementation of actions designed to engage with stakeholders. Now, stakeholders are individuals or groups with an interest in the organization, project, or portfolio. They have an involvement in the work or are impacted by the outcomes. Now, most organizations and projects have a variety of stakeholders with different and sometimes competing interests. Influence over the eventual success or failure of the work generally comes down to the individuals and groups involved. There are 4 main steps involved in stakeholder management. There are a set of techniques that harness the positive influences and minimize the effects of negative influences. Identify stakeholders. This is where you assess their interests and influence. You must also develop communication management plans. You've got to engage and influence stakeholders. By conducting research, interviews, brainstorming, checklists, lessons learned, and so on, we can identify the stakeholders. A stakeholder map can be used to categorize the stakeholders and their areas of interest. Now, to keep it simple, there are typically 4 types of stakeholders. There are owners, shareholders, customers, individuals and groups performing the work. Now, individuals and groups affected by the work, statutory and regulatory bodies also play their role, and to classify each stakeholder according to the potential impact, we can use a simple matrix that estimates interest and influence, such as low, medium, and high. Now, questions to consider when assessing stakeholders are: how will they be impacted by the work? Will they be supportive, negative, or undecided? What are their expectations, and how can these be managed? And who or what influences the stakeholder view of the project? Who will manage the stakeholders and why? So once the analysis is completed, it's used to develop a communication management plan, which we touched on earlier. You should then define strategies and actions to engage with stakeholders in different parts of the matrix. Now, communication is critical to the success of an organizational project. Communication with stakeholders who are inherently positive about the work will be different from those stakeholders who are negative. And equally, stakeholders who have high levels of interest and influence will be managed differently from those with stakeholders of low interest and influence. It's critical to effectively select those that are required to engage with each stakeholder. In addition to board members and executive managers, it is useful to call upon peers, senior managers, or others who may be better placed to help. Relationships make or break a project and an organization, and this is a dynamic document. Therefore, the communication management plan must link to other plans, such as strategic plans, risk management plans, and even a 90-day priority plan with a schedule. Now, in my advisory firm, Argentum Lineo, we pride ourselves on providing exceptional stakeholder management. I specialize in third-party perspective and objectivity. We help our clients navigate the often treacherous complexities, I should say, of change, new proposals, new products, and market expansions. And we have client records that clearly articulate smoother transition, minimal, if any, disruption, and strong implementation. Now, let's talk about the second part, which is strategy. Now, strategy is a plan of action designed to achieve a long-term or overall aim. Strategic thinking is how people think about, assess, view, and create the future for themselves and others. It's about being able to envisage new solutions to old problems and to constantly reinvent your views in unique ways to benefit your company's purpose. It's a mental process applied in the context of achieving success in a game, business, or endeavor. So it's to innovate and imagine new and different futures, potentially leading the company to redefine its core strategies of its industry. Now, strategic thinking is imperative to our success or failure, and this is particularly relevant right now. In fact, always. So why is strategic thinking so important? Having advised over 500 companies across 18 countries, I've seen many common pitfalls. Some I have personally experienced in my own business journey, and from my observations and experience, business owners and C-suite executives too often get caught up in the day-to-day running of their business. They spend a lot of time working in the business. They become internally focused, and most planning becomes short-term. For this reason, strategic thinking is important because it forces you to take a big picture view, one from the helicopter, where you can hover over above at a controlled distance and speed. Strategic thinking is future-orientated. It considers risk and return and requires an inquisitive mind that is constantly questioning. This is one of many reasons a lot of good companies work with strategic advisors, so they can become great companies. It provides the business owners and executives someone independent to draw them back out of the common pitfalls and helps them look at the company from a very high level. Strategic thinking can be taught. You are not simply born with it. I have had the privilege of serving hundreds of clients, and despite most of them being convinced that they did not possess the power of strategic thinking, they all quickly realized that following 6 simple steps, they all became better strategic thinkers. Now, these steps are no secret, and for you to become a better strategic thinker, you must schedule time to think and reflect. You got to take a helicopter view. You got to build your curiosity and exposure to new things. You've got to value diversity. You got to practice thinking, approaching situations, challenges, and the future in different ways. And you need to be open to creative and inventive and innovative ways and ideas. Now that we've actually covered strategy, what it means to be a strategic thinker, and why it's important, we need to explore strategic planning. Put simply, strategic planning is the process of selecting goals and developing a way to teach them. Strategic planning helps a business understand where it is now and where it is going, and what it needs to do to get there. It's often long-term and uncertain. It is an iterative process where different ways to achieve the goal or goals are considered, tried, refined in an effort to become more effective. And if it's not absolutely clear to you yet, the absolute purpose of a strategic plan is to provide you with a roadmap for growth to achieve your goals. In all my years of serving people, not having a roadmap is singularly the most obvious reason for failure. Just because it is in your head, it doesn't mean you can articulate it, follow it, and instruct others to follow you. Organizations exist to achieve a goal or goals. Why did you start your business? Why are you considering starting a company? Why did you choose to take this role as a C-suite executive? There is always a deep why, and often it is supported by a goal or goals. It's simply beyond ambition. Jack Canfield writes that there's an enduring axiom of success that says the universe rewards action, not thought. Yet, as simple as this principle seems, it's surprising how many people get bogged down in the analyzing, planning, and organizing stages when what they really need to do is simply take action. When you take action, not only do additional resources come your way, but you get feedback that helps you adjust your course and refine your approach. The truth is, while most of us know a lot about earning money, making things happen and bringing about change in the world, only a surprising few get to have all the abundance, glory, and satisfaction this world has to offer, simply because they are the select few who consistently do what? Take action. Taking action is the one thing that separates the winners from the non-winners. The haves from the have-nots, and the high achievers from the everyday people. Perhaps you've already seen someone create a big win in their life, only to grumble to yourself, I could have done that. Or perhaps you've watched a co-worker launch a new project that included your ideas, only to conclude that you stood by while they took action. What we think or what we know or what we believe is, in the end, is of little consequence. The only consequence is what we do. And that was John Ruskin. The simple fact remains that in life, we are not rewarded for what we know, but for what we do. Of course, many people don't take action because they're fearful of consequences. And perhaps they feel they don't have permission, or perhaps they're more afraid of failure than they are of success. Now, successful people realize that failure is an important part of the learning process. They know that failure is just a way we learn by trial and error. Not only do we need to stop being so afraid of failure, but we also need to be willing to fail. I call this kind of instructive failure, failing forward. Now, simply get started, make mistakes, listen to the feedback, correct, and keep moving forward toward your goal. When you're in action, doing research, connecting with people, finding ways to accomplish a goal, you are sending a powerful signal to the universe that you expect and anticipate meeting that goal or enjoying that experience. Are you pumped right now? If not, pause and go back to the beginning. If you're pumped, then drop a comment below, particularly if you're on YouTube. And if you are on one of the other podcast channels, rate the show. So for those that are still with me, and I hope it's all of you, now I'm going to share with you what I uncovered much later in life, and I wished I'd learnt this earlier. After building a great strategy and taking massive action in building a $30 million empire, becoming the Restaurant and Catering Australia Young Achiever of the Year and nominee for the Central Region of the Ernst & Young Entrepreneur of the Year, I experienced catastrophic failure, whereby I became homeless, penniless, and depressed. It was at this time that I reflected on not why me, but how. On this discovery journey, not only did I find out what happened, but how it happened, and more importantly, I discovered who I was and my purpose moving forward. It was at this time that I began to explore how great companies think and behave. Now, rather than focus on what makes a good company, I began to look at what makes a great company as opposed to just a good one. I raised the thermostat. I went to uni, I did my MBA, I started a new business with a new attitude on action and failed quickly and often using those lessons to improve, grow, and scale. I became an adjunct professor, an entrepreneur in resident, sharing my wisdom and experience with the next global entrepreneurs. And I helped them raise $189 million in less than 12 months. So what did I learn that made me able to not only massively improve my life, but the lives of so many others? I learned how good companies became great. And I am going to share this with you right now. Aren't you glad that you stuck around today? Here we go. The basic can be summed up into 7 areas, and they are level 5 leadership, first who, then what, confront brutal facts, but have faith, the hedgehog concept, the culture of discipline, the technology accelerators, and the flywheel and doom loop. Now, level 5 leadership is when business owners and executives channel their ego needs away from themselves and into the larger goal of building a great company. Now, this is when you combine humanity and will. How do you get to a level 5? Well, you start as a highly capable individual who becomes a contributing team member. And then you're elevated to a competent manager through to an effective leader. It is at this point that by combining humility and will, you can reach that level 5 leadership. So first who, then what is about making sure you get the right people in the right positions and then figure out where to go. Too often, I meet business owners who have never done this exercise. Instead, they keep the wrong people on the bus and they are forced outside the bus, pushing the bus uphill. Can you relate? It doesn't have to be that way. If this is you, start by getting in the bus and assessing who belongs in it, and then make sure they are seated exactly where they should be, then start driving, not pushing. Confront brutal facts, but have faith is founded on the Stockdale paradox, which it goes a little like this. Maintain unwavering faith that you can and will prevail, regardless of the difficulties, and at the same time, confront the most brutal facts of your current reality. Bam! I experienced hell for years when I failed catastrophically, but I had faith throughout the brutal facts and reality. I learnt to accept my failures and face the facts. My faith set me free, and after many years, I was born again. I have never stopped learning since then, and I have continued to face adversity despite my unwavering faith. This is why I have prevailed. You too, if you are facing difficult times, build your resilience and seek out help. Don't ask why, ask how and what you can do to overcome. The hedgehog concept is the intersection of three circles. What are you deeply passionate about? What can you do that makes you the best in the world? And what drives your economic engine? When you find the place where all of these three converge, you'll uncover meaning and outcome. The hedgehog concept is an interactive process which asks questions guided by the three circles. So dialogue and debate, and then you've got to make decisions and you've got to analyze. Now, the culture of discipline is exactly that. All companies have a culture. Some have discipline, but only a few have a culture of discipline. This means that when you have disciplined people, you don't need hierarchy. When you have discipline, you don't need bureaucracy. And when you have disciplined action, you don't need excessive controls. Now, Jim Collins says, when you combine a culture of discipline with an ethic of entrepreneurship, you get the magical alchemy of great performance. Remember, culture eats, strategy for breakfast. And then we have the technology accelerators. Now, technology accelerators recognize that technology is never the primary driver for transformation. Great companies think differently about the role of technology, and they pioneer carefully selected applications. Finally, the flywheel or doom loop. Which will you be? This is what separates the good and the great, and sometimes what makes the good and the great fail. With the flywheel, it's about building up through disciplined people, disciplined thought, and disciplined actions, and then breaking through. The doom loop is when you're not building up, you have no accumulated momentum, you get disappointing results, and then you react without understanding and create new directions, bring in a new leader, establish a fad, or go ahead and make an acquisition to cover the issues. Now, this creates a downward trajectory that often ends in failure. So, we've covered the difference between a good and bad company. We explored how good companies become great. And now I'm going to give you a taste of how great companies think and behave differently. Now, don't forget to rate this episode and share it with your friends. That is, if it is having an impact on you right now. So, how do great companies think and behave differently? At a very high level, and in summary only, because I want to do a part 2 on this next week, where I will take a deep dive on the summary so that you can have a set of awesome takeaways to implement in your business and organizations immediately. So here we go. Great companies have 6 things in common. 1, they have a common purpose. They have a coherent identity that provides them with a buffer against uncertainty and change. 2, they have a long-term focus. This allows them to justify any short-term financial sacrifices required to achieve the company's purpose and endure over time. 3, they generate emotional engagement. The transformation of company values can evoke positive emotions. It can stimulate motivation and propel self-regulation or peer regulation. Number 4, they partner with the public. This means that the need for cross-borders and sectors to tap into new business is accompanied by concerns for public issues beyond the boundaries of that firm. 5, they are innovative. They articulate a purpose broader than making money that can guide strategies and actions. And 6, they self-organize. They assume they can trust their people and can rely on relationships, not just structures and rules. Leaders of great companies can tell a different story about the basis of their decisions. In doing so, they are able to produce new models for action and can restore confidence in a business that will change the landscape in which they operate. By understanding the difference between a good and bad company, you give yourself a good opportunity to survive. Understanding what makes a good company great will give you the opportunity to thrive, and if you apply the principles that make a great company think and behave differently, you will give yourself the best possible chance to grow and flourish. I have really loved hanging out with you today and sharing my thoughts on this very important and powerful topic that has the power to impact many. I hope that you are able to take the principles and learnings that I have shared with you today and put them into practice in your daily lives and in your business and firms. The purpose has become a cornerstone in my teaching and coaching of business owners. Knowing the causes of failure and knowing the habits and principles that help you succeed will allow you to go forward with courage. Building courage is a key instrument in accelerating my clients' growth and deepening their impact, both professionally and personally. I want this for you, and this is why I share my knowledge and experience in my podcast each week. If you loved today's podcast and are enjoying the series, please take a minute to rate it and provide a review. This helps others know that the content that I'm sharing is valuable, but also it inspires me to share more content with you. Please take care during this time, be kind and be courageous. And as always, live with purpose.